let's jump into things. It's 11:03 on Saturday the 24th. So 1 week left of this month, and wow, what a week wasn't that? I actually sort of saw before. It was the dollar's worst week in 9 months, and things are just cracking and absolutely going everywhere. I mean, what a week! I mean, we started off with it's almost like it gets a little bit tiring, but we started off with Greenland and the EU tariff debacle over last weekend, caused a little bit of a gap down. I'm starting here on Aussie, and really that was a snifter of a second. And I mean, look at Aussie for a week here. Oh, wait, there's a weekly candle. Bang! That is absolutely through the roof. And this is the thing, it's sort of like there was a lot of people, myself included, thinking, hey, look, we've sort of kind of roll over here. I mean, look at this. We've got one, two, three, four rejections at these levels over here. Nice big top wicks. I'm trying to move it down, trying to move it down, and then squeeze the hell out of everyone and moves it up to the top side here. So we're coming into what could be a little bit of a sort of resistance here. This is obviously on the weekly, which is a little bit of a higher sort of time frame than normally sort of trade, but overboard, closed right at the highs over here. So I think next week's going to be a little bit telling in that. Obviously, when you're sort of closing with such bullish momentum, you're most likely going to get a little bit of a carry on moving into next week. But we're right back up on the cusp of 69 cents, which is really sort of taking us back up body fills of back in September 24. So this is, let's bang a little line across here. This is really on fire at the moment. As you can see, that's exactly kind of where it filled. So I would be expecting probably some pushback from this area over here. Like these things, you don't spend better part of 2 years sort of going up. Whoops. Let's do this again. Anyway, whatever. We'll fix it up. You don't spend 2 years working your way back up here and then just pop straight through. Yeah, the dollar got smashed. Yes, it's sort of definitely sort of on its ass at the moment. But I would say that you're probably sort of going to see some sort of recalibration of that move, at least sort of through next week. The likelihood of these kind of things coming up here without having some external, extra news-driven event that would just see it shoot straight through is most likely people are just going to be like, yeah, okay, here we go, bang, and you're going to start to see some selling pressure. So I would be cautious about sort of longing Aussie from these highs at the moment. But certainly, look, it jumped very hard this week. We had the jobs numbers come out, and I think that was the obviously it was starting to move a little bit prior to that, but that was the big mover with it, which was, I think, this day here, must have been on the Thursday, and that job numbers really sort of beat. And go back and have a quick look at them. Uh, this was the big driver with it. I mean, look, employment change was a big push as well from revised down to 28,000. They expected to push up to 28,000. It came to 62. That's very strong. And then this is the big mover with it all. Not only were they sort of pricing, even though they were buying it up prior to this, a increase in the unemployment rate, still around that 4.3, 4.4 area, came in at 4.1. And in my opinion, this is a bigger mover than the employment change, the unemployment rate. And Aussie just took off and never really looked back. If you have a look at this on a lower time frame, you can see this is the jump. It went boom, and it just never really kind of came back here at all. Set up a couple of little sort of consolidation areas through here, which, should this thing come back down, basically what we're going to use is sort of confirmation lines. We're going to use this as sort of points where sort of like, we can look to sort of like add to longs or, expect the buyers obviously to hold this sort of trail over here. But these are the kind of two lines that I'm sort of looking for, these little trend up here lines. So I wouldn't be surprised, as I said, this is the body fill up over here. If we get up into this area and start to see a bit of a pushback, this first sort of moving up sort of support lines through here, and then definitely we're going to see something come down over here. So if we do see profit taking, look, low to mid 68s. So it's crazy to be saying this. I mean, Aussie has just been so weak for so long. That was back in 24, so all of 25 didn't really do any of this. But as we're seeing, the dollar is getting absolutely pulverized. Metals are going through the roof. One thing I noticed about 2025 is it was the year of correlations not working at all. Like we had metals pretty much obviously all through the year going to highs. We had sort of equity markets pushing all-time highs. copper, obviously gold, silver, all this kind of stuff. And Aussie was just really lagging, like it just wasn't responding. And these are the kind of typical kind of correlations that you can look for when you're trading Aussie because it's a risk-on kind of currency. And obviously, equity markets is a good barometer for sort of market sentiment for risk. And then we've got sort of like the dollar was obviously quite weak as well, yet Aussie was still kind of lagging sort of through all of 2025. So it seems like they've turned on the afterburners at the moment and they're playing a little bit of catch up. So look, I think this is kind of the setting the trend and the direction of where we are going. If we get back onto this one here, we do have this big sort of trend line that we did come through. One of the problem with having sort of 10 of these charts. Here we go. This is the weekly one here. So, as I said, we are sort of coming into what could be seen as a little bit of a rising resistance here. We do have the horizontal coming through here as well. But certainly, I think the fact that we've sort of gone through this big sort of falling resistance, we did have a little bit of a back test. I was looking for a little bit of a push down to 65.50. It would have been nice to sort of get on board with this and sort of ride this move up over here. But as I said, I think this is the direction we are sort of going through 2025. And it's just a matter of sort of like, where do they see little bits of profit taking? Where can we sort of get on board to sort of ride this on a little bit? So I'll just put this along the top here as well, because obviously that's our next sort of high to go above. And then, of course, once we're getting up here, we're sort of going way back to above 70s. Like, Aussie's not been at 70. Well, I mean, Feb 23 was when we would poked our nose up above it, and that was obviously a big run. I mean, the speed of this run is a lot quicker. Look at this big V shape, and then boom, double top coming down through here. This has been a long, very chuggy run coming back up over the last sort of 8-9 months or so. That was April when we had that big sell off to sub 60, and here we are almost 1,000 points higher. But it has taken a long time. So it is like the biggest we've seen, but this goes to show that sort of like, as I said, like, even though Aussie isn't part of DXY, it is obviously going to be sort of affected by the USD flows across the market and the sentiment towards the dollar more broadly. So obviously, it having like the dollar having its worst week in 9 months. Well, this is probably equivalent to sort of Aussie. So the best week that Aussie had was obviously after it got absolutely pulverized. But prior to that, like positive wise, I can't really see. Maybe back down over here in October 23, we had a pretty positive week. It's slightly different. This is coming off the lows here. I remember this bit here, back test of a big sort of breakout triangle, falling wedge, sorry. But these big weeks like this, generally we'll see some sort of profit taking, even if it is just a little bit of a push like this one here. Obviously, this isn't at the top of its sort of trend here. So I'd be cautious about after these big, massive weeks, thinking we're just going to get another big move. Like these weeks have sort of continued on, but this is a thumper of a week really for the Aussie. So what did we do? Spent a few hundred points or so. Yes. 230 points, nearly 4% in 1 week. So, I mean, as I said, you trade silver, you do 5% in a session at the moment. But Aussie certainly, most FX pairs aren't doing sort of 3% on a weekly sort of basis. Why is this not working? 2 secs. Get that there. All right, so that's a bigger sort of overview. So I think that's sort of setting the trend for Aussie. What can we do? How can we sort of apply it, and how can we get on board with it all? Well, as I said, I do think that possibly we are sort of coming near some sort of pretty strong sort of resistance that'll be up around the sort of like between 69, 69.40 or so. 20s tend to be, I've noticed these numbers even have been a little bit off well, I say this year, it's only been 3 weeks, but, the 20s, the 60s and the 90s tend to hold a little bit of sort of resistance or support, depending which direction you're coming through. And we can see, obviously, here, held very strong, very strong, very strong. And once we sort of broke away above this sort of 60 over here as well, you can see this is in the 60s. Once you break away from there, it was a little of a thought, bang, and moved all the way up over here. But look, what is it? I was saying, if we go back onto our sort of short-term chart. I would expect probably a little bit of a pushback at some stage in the next sort of like 50, 40 points or so. I would be sort of looking around this level over here, around sort of like 68.38. It tried to get down under here a couple of times through Friday's session, and it looked like it was going almost, and then bang, sort of shot back up there. But it was very similar to what we sort of saw with gold last Friday, not yesterday, but the one before, where we had a little bit of a range setting through the whole week, didn't get the close underneath, and it almost sort of used it as like a shotgun, like a bang, and went up to the top over here. So very much moving forward, moving sort of very forward and sort of capitalizing on that sort of weaker dollar. So yeah, I would be sort of reluctant to buy anything too soon. But certainly, I think if you get back into the 68.40, 68.50, we could probably expect a little bit of a buying effort. Look, while it's above this trend, I would say, and I'm talking medium term here, I would say you've still got to just buy the dips, buy the dips, buy the dips. Even underneath here, you probably still buy the dips, but as you can see, the ranges get a little bit bigger sort of once you're getting down over here. So then you're looking back down 67, 60s, that kind of sort of thing with it all. So yeah, I think we could potentially see some profit taking soon, and then sort of look for a pullback and look for where buys are sort of happening around maybe sort of mid 68s. If we do break this trend, then I'd be probably looking even 68. I think if you break this trend, I think you're probably looking mid 67s. But of course, yeah, that's a fair bit of profit taking through that point there. If we did sort of say like this isn't a confirmed top, so you can't really use the fib as of quite yet because we haven't got a guaranteed top in. Um, and if we have a look at sort of say this were to sort of just turn around on a dime, bang, pulling back down over here, around that sort of 60, as I said, around this kind of area over here, this would be a pretty good buy opportunity to have a pretty good sort of risk reward. 61% broke the trend, shook out a lot of the people that didn't take profit through this monster run. Gives a chance retest these levels down here, which is obviously the top of this sort of little potential head and shoulders that people were trading, and then sort of have a look to sort of see if you can really sort of rip that one up from there. So yeah, low sort of mid 67s would be a great sort of buy opportunity. Should this should we get the opportunity to buy it from there? I would say most likely these kind of things at this kind of speed aren't going to continue. So yeah, be cautious, but maybe some early profit taking throughout the week. If we do get an opportunity down here, that'll be a buy option. But I'd certainly be even having little shots in that sort of the idea that this buying will just sort of continue. I think we have quarterly inflation this week as well. Let's have a quick look. Yeah, so we got CPI. So is this not quarterly? Let me check. Yeah, I'm not sure. I'm pretty sure that we have quarterly sort of coming out here as well. Anyway, we've got a slight expectation, a slight tick up here, and of course, sort of like with CPI up, that's obviously sort of going to pretty much not, you can never say guarantee, but it would definitely push it into the direction of a more hawkish response, given how strong the jobs market, the jobs numbers were for the Aussie dollar. So definitely this is going to keep Aussie bid for quite some time. So if you're lucky, you get down here, but there's certainly some levels to have little pot shots at sort of earlier. All right, so moving on, let's jump onto what everybody's talking about, silver. Wow, this thing is just unbelievable. I mean, look, every single week you could kind of say, yeah, it's unbelievable, unbelievable. And it's consolidated periods, it was lagging sort of through this week. I did sort of highlight a couple of times with the daily analysis that how gold was like ripping to the top and then silver really just unable to get out. It was very much sort of lagging a little bit here. I really would have liked. I was trying to catch this short position down to this side over here. I got clipped out at 92, and I was like, damn it, man, would have liked to get down here because what I was potentially sort of looking for was a pullback down to these levels. As I did that video, this is kind of what I was looking for, a larger range to form to then sort of get a bit of a carry on here. But as you can see, the buyers are really just pushing up their bid more and more and more. And look, there's no real sort of protection. For a second, this looked like this was holding. This was sort of like through sort of Asia, Europe. If you have a look on the lower time frame, you can kind of see it respected this line pretty well. and sort of came back down here. But it's similar with gold. If you saw what the Friday analysis, I would say this is what you potentially should be looking for was the test of these levels prior, people sort of getting out, trying to jump in before the sort of big level. Obviously, with this one was 100 and with gold 5,000, the pullback there, and then look for a little base and then take off. And this thing absolutely just, as you can see, it's just straight one-way traffic here. So metals at the moment seem very much a case of sort of not sort of like well, certainly neither of them are sort of bearish, but like it's not a matter of sort of like okay sorry, I should say it is more a matter of kind of like who's taking the flows right now. As I said, silver was lagging through the week, gold thumping to the top side. Now we're seeing gold obviously still pushing here, but unable to get through its magic number, which is 5,000, and silver just bang ripped off here and that. So I said on the Friday video here as well that sort of like this was the move that we looked at on from low to high on that sort of Friday session or something like along the same. And I said, look, 6%. If we do this on top, that takes you to 102. It blew past that. It came up sort of 103, geez, wow. So look, I mean, can you say anything other than this thing is just going absolutely parabolic? I mean, if you get out onto like a weekly, I mean, take the thing off here. I mean, that's just, I mean, things don't move like this. So, yeah, look, I think sort of while this is absolutely going up like this, definitely look, it will eventually sometimes find find a high, but nobody can say. This thing just keeps performing, keeps performing, keeps performing. Could be 108, could be 112, could be 124, could be 140. Who knows? The point is, I mean, look, even the charts and all this kind of thing, this has just got absolutely, I mean, I suppose it's turning up now. It's taken 3 weeks of a gain of, what's this come for here? So, it's gone up 43% this year. That's January here. Yeah, well, actually, yeah, technically a little bit. Actually, probably started January. No. Anyway, around here, 43% in, what is it, the 24th of January. So this thing is just absolutely on fire. So what we can try and do, all we can try and do with this kind of sort of stuff is look for where this thing might sort of come back to and then try and jump on board with that. Like with these sort of moves over here, we do get top signals from time to time. And when these sell downs come, like they're pretty good little sharp sell downs and that. But as long as they keep buying up and putting in new highs, so here's your low, here's your low, here's your low. As long as these keep sort of taking higher, 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 obviously we'll get something back maybe around this sort of like 99, retest at that 100 level. If we see the buyers step in there again and these fast, long wicks coming out of the bottom of it, particularly this kind of setup here where we have 2 strong attempts to come down lower and both times big strong wicks plus a strong move on the back of it, that just means, look, the buy is still very strong. Most likely you're going to see another level going a bit higher there as well. So to sort of say where you could get on board, I mean, look, this thing obviously just went berserk into close. But as I said, sort of, I wouldn't be surprised if we see a little bit of pairing of these kind of moves. It was quite an exaggerated move, obviously with this, with the dollar, all this kind of stuff into the end of the week. It doesn't mean that sort of like, okay, it's going to completely reverse course, but generally these things will see a little bit of a pushback potentially sort of like even if it is on the Tuesday there. So again, you could potentially sort of maybe gap up. Let's put this up over here. Again, it's just pot shots as to where you might. Here's a high. Here's a high. Does this go to 106? Certainly possible. Yeah, I mean, it's certainly possible. But certainly once we start to see some sort of little sort of, consolidation area, we can then start to go, okay, is this going to break? Is it going to break? Where's it going to come back to? This little breakout line over here, which is just sub of 100, I wouldn't be surprised. I think that, look, it's hard to sort of say, sort of like, with that many people really sort of going, hey, let's put our stops just above 100, I'll say short, I'll give it a shot, but if it goes above 100, I'll go, because it's a pretty sort of, it's a big sort of monumental number. Obviously, they tried to push it down a couple of times here. This is just on a 1 hour, where we get 101, pushing back down there. But again, look, from a structural standpoint, this is where you'd be looking. 90, 99, sort of 30s, 99, 50s to see if this comes back up. What we have been seeing though is these kind of moves, like it will sort of come back, no, without a doubt. It may go to 106 first and then come back, but whatever, it will come back towards this 100 level. What we have been seeing, and this is another tell as well, is structurally this should go here and then move up like that. Like, in quote unquote sort of perfect world, that's how a move will, you'll get your breakout, you get your back test, and then on you go. What we've been seeing though is that the buyers aren't even waiting for the back test and they're coming in like this. And so you've got your bid down here, and then they're not sort of waiting, hold on, wait, here's the structural move to go to here. They're going, bang, let's get on board. And that again is another tell that this thing just keeps on powering through. So look, I wouldn't be surprised if sort of we do get some options around that 100 level. Look, it's a big psychological level as well. I wouldn't be surprised if sort of people have that same sort of mentality of like, wow, we've got the big breakout, 103, closed on the end of the week, this thing's on fire, it's going to 140. If it breaks below 100, then maybe I'll sort of jump out. So I wouldn't be surprised if you do get a sort of push down into this kind of area over here. Maybe 98. Look, it sounds like a gift if you get $98 now. But certainly I think if you get a push back down into these levels, you have to expect that the buyers are going to definitely just run this thing back up here again. So I would, again, look, a lot of these things, closing right on the highs, right into the end of the week, you could probably expect a bit of a gap up, a bit of a flow through there. But, I would sort of be waiting at least for a pullback to sort of test around that 99, maybe slash 100 level to see if you can sort of get on board there. So if we drop a little fib just over this one last move, and again, it's the move, the top isn't confirmed, so you can't really use this. Say this does turn around, boom, comes back down here, 38% comes right into that zone. Say this comes up to resistance levels over here, that's a 50% retracement of these things. So look, I wouldn't be surprised, but I think I'd sort of certainly be waiting around these kind of two zones over here to sort of see what we could do in terms of sort of pullback entries. But yeah, like most things in that, you just don't want to buy just off the hype. And then fine, you see everybody else is taking their profit because of it's absolutely just killed it, and you're left holding the bag at the top. So at least give yourself a bit of a sort of pullback option for a sort of push in there. So levels I'd sort of be looking at would be sort of around that sort of, as I said, 99.30 down to 90. I mean, it sort of seems crazy, doesn't it? Sort of like going, hey, if I'm lucky, I'll get 97 bucks. But we could also see a retest overshoot back down to here, maybe 95. I mean, 61% of that, and then again, same with the Aussie. If you get this move back down over here, and you get a 61% chance, 61% chance you get a chance at the 61% of just this one breakout move. It's still obviously a sniff off the highs of it all. I think there you're going to get a very good sort of risk reward sort of trade, because again, these things are going to come in their move. So you've got your sort of move up, we're going to find resistance, we're going to get this move back down here. As to how far this comes, it could come here, could come here, could come here, kind of thing. We are also going to get this third move here. This thing's not going to die, most likely in a big spike top. Maybe you get a blow off top, but more likely for the time being, while this thing is still potentially bullish, but still potentially going much higher, that could be your sort of your structure that you look for, i.e. sort of we wait for this pullback through here, and then whether it's sort of coming in around sort of 99.50s, 97, 98, or if you're lucky, 96, and then sort of continue on. But, the pullbacks have been quite shallow, as you can see, sort of through here. And again, this is another way that you use these fibs. You can sort of see that sort of like this pullback here through the week came down and clipped the 23%. 23% and then take out the highs is a very strong continuation line. It's basically saying that, very little people are sort of taking profit and they keep pushing it up. Like, if you think it's going to 103, where it is right now, you're happy to buy it at 90. It's obviously a lot better to buy it down here because you got a bigger sort of push back up. But the fact that the bid just keeps hammering up, sort of goes to show that sort of like, they're happy to push this through. We see the move through. Here's the breakout. We look for the back test. And then we sort of look to sort of capitalize on that next move coming up over here. So I would be, look, if you get below 100, if you get down to sort of 97, I think that's a pretty good sort of risk reward entry over there. All right, let's tick along and have a look at the other metal. So this is gold, obviously. What a solid week this was as well for it all. So it was a couple of, it was like just to unpack the week with it all. We had this sort of consolidation that was happening last week, so not this week, just had here, and it set up a beautiful sort of little baseline here. We had that Hassett headline, which sort of dumped it right down, back up 2 seconds later with the Greenland sort of thing. Look, I've have to admit, look, I'm a Trump fan, all in all, but it's going to the point of a little bit of ridiculousness with these headlines, and even just the market response to this kind of stuff, I just sort of find a little bit infuriating because, like, we do see, we see what he's doing. I mean, you say, I'm going to do this, I'll give you a 1,000,000% tariff, and then okay, let's settle on 10. You know what I mean? It's asked for the world, and then sort of you take whatever you're happy with initially, and it's sort of like, hey, there's a pullback. It's not a it's not a unique new sort of like mythical approach. And every time this kind of stuff happens, you see X flooded with pictures of art of the deal. You want to know what Trump's doing? Read this book. I mean, if you don't know it by now, you're kind of a little bit behind the curve. However, the market still reacts to this stuff, and we saw the big pump up over here on the open. This was the candle we were looking for, a big blue candle outside this range, or a big sort of, in this case, orange candle down to the bottom side here. We didn't get the close down here, fire back up here, and this is what I was saying, like with Aussie before. It's almost sort of like a shotgun, bang, and away it went. Absolutely ripped up to the top side here. So its big number, 5,000, didn't quite get there, consolidating a little bit just underneath the highs of it. If you have a look on the sort of daily, it is pretty much there, ready to rock and roll. But look at that for a week for gold. Like, that is a thumper sort of candle. I mean, what do we do for the week in terms of percentage? That's nearly 10% week, better part of 10%, 8.6 or so there. So, these metals just keep on firing, keep on going up. As much as the dollar keeps getting absolutely hammered, it seems to be the only place. Like, people talk about this whole sort of de-dollarization kind of argument, and it's absolutely everywhere. We had Davos this week as well, and, that's the sort of the talking heads, the hot topic is de-dollarization. Everyone's going away from the dollar and that. In terms of the fiat sort of side of it all, there doesn't really seem to be, at this stage, a completely viable alternative. Obviously, you've got the euro, but the euro's got a whole heap of its own problems. You've got somewhere in the works, in the pipelines, this BRICS thing sort of opening up or setting themselves up, but that's obviously not there. And then you've got the RMB, like the yuan, and that's made incredible gains for itself, but it's not outside China. I don't know how. Maybe some like African nations or something may sort of like settle or trade in. And I actually saw. I thought I saw 50% of their sort of oil or something like this is settled in that. I don't know. Anyway, but beside the point. The reason I say this at the moment is because while there's no fiat sort of alternative, metals are the obvious place that people are doing to get away from the US dollar. And this is why we're sort of seeing these things absolutely thump to the top side here. So look, again, we're getting to these points of where you can't really apply any sort of actual sort of technical analysis till you get these like little compression areas, and we're getting little breakouts and that. But you say, okay, here's potentially a channel. Well, it blows out the top, tests it up, and then just springboards off the top side of it and goes higher and higher with it all. So again, look, I wouldn't be surprised if we do see that pop of 5,000. I'd be very surprised actually if we don't see it move through 5,000. The fact that it didn't make it through, I don't think sort of really matters a great deal. But if anything, we could see a little bit more consolidation before it does go through. But this is a little bit of a zone here. Again, look, these things are really, they're coming up. I mean, they're negative divergence, but for the time being, it's not really affecting it too much. A little bit of a wedge forming out the top over here. So again, look, I think still the approach is definitely sort of buy dips on this kind of thing. If we do get a bit of a deeper sort of correction in that, maybe down sub 49. I mean, we're a sniff off 5,000 here. Doesn't mean it can't go to 5,000 then pull back here, but I think certainly, while it's above 4,900, it's definitely still buy the dip kind of thing. So as I said, I wouldn't be surprised, maybe you sort of take it out early. If you don't take it out early, and if we do see, look for the dollar, look for silver, for those kind of things, for signals there as well. But if it doesn't sort of pop it early, then you might see a little bit more of a pullback and maybe a bit of a consolidation around these high levels over here. But I think certainly while it's above 4,900, it's just sort of buy the dip kind of stuff. I mean, even if it goes under 4,900, it's still definitely still buy the dip sort of status. But you're looking back down, as I said, because these things are moving so much, you're like, oh, look, if it doesn't hold 49, well, realistically, you're looking at 48.30 to 47.80. So it's quite a big sort of drop off there. So, like in terms of dollar things, in terms of percentage, well, this is the world that we live in now with these things. But realistically, right now, look, if it doesn't go through even if it does go through 5,000, bottom side, you want to see it hold 4,900. But while it's up over here, you've got a pretty good sort of risk reward to be buying 4,900. If it doesn't hold 4,900 though, doesn't mean it's dead, but it just means that you probably got a little bit of a way down to next reasonable kind of, and this is on a 4 hour, next reasonable sort of idea of where the buyers are there. Like it had an absolutely thumping week. I suppose if you put it next to silver, it doesn't look as thumping, but it's still very extremely bullish kind of thing. So buy the dips in that. Just if it doesn't hold 49, you could probably get a better entry down at 47.80s to 4,800, I'd say. Just pop this here for now. As you say, sort of like give yourself a little bit of area with this sort of range here. But again, a little bit of sort of a wedge up over here. It's tightening up. It could definitely still just open up and just go bang through there. I'd be very surprised. I think it's pretty much a matter of sort of obviously when, not if. But as I said, if it doesn't break through here earlier, I think you got a much better sort of risk reward down around these sort of 4,900s. All right, and move along. We got the dollar absolutely pulverized. As I said at the start of this thing, it was the worst week in 9 months. I really didn't think this was going to play out. Let's have a look at this in terms of measured move sort of status. Actually, let's do that. Despite the messy charts, I do like things to be the same color. Bang. All right, so we can see this bear flag. Can't protect from time there. Well, closed even further down. And this is the point that I'm sort of saying with it. I think that coming into the end of the week, this was just an accelerated move. This was what we were saying though. So like, if you don't hold this level here, this is where we were expecting it to hold. Didn't hold here, just chopped straight through here. This feels a bit more like a stop run. People were just getting to the door as quick as they could. It's really in a very precarious, dangerous sort of point here. Not only did it break this sort of little horizontal here, we've also got this sort of, kind of rising support that it broke through there as well. And if we look in terms of structure coming down here, we found support, we found resistance, we tackled the lows, we've broken through. So realistically, what we're looking for now is a continuation of this structured move. Next place that we look for on a higher time frame is down around 96.60, and that's going to be real crucial time. We can see it held twice through, the mid to late last year in 2025. That's going to be crucial. It's not going to break through first time, but as I've said a couple of times, when you start to sort of pull away from what the structure is, i.e. sort of this move here, it looked like we were coming up to the top. Now we've had the sellers come down here a little bit as well. Really, what we're sort of seeing here was maybe potentially a triangle sort of coming through, and they just, as soon as they gave it up, they just absolutely dumped the hell out of it. So, look, pretty disappointing for the dollar actually, because obviously with all these sort of things, I've been sort of on the idea that this was going to charge through. At least we were going to get a test up around that sort of 100 level. And really, it kind of got thumped. It was very quiet for that Martin Luther King Day, but it got thumped, thought about it, and then particularly end of the week there, just got absolutely slammed down there as well. So, look, it's through this level. It didn't even stop to think about it. It's going to be something that it's going to have to prove itself back above. You're not going to get a V-shaped recovery with these kind of things. However, I do believe these kind of moves that are accelerated, closing on the lows right into the end of the week, I wouldn't, with this little measured move kind of played out, I wouldn't be surprised if we do see a little bit of a rebalancing of this. And this is again, I think, will be dragging some sort of flows from the metals kind of market of that. I mean, obviously they're on a charge at the moment, and dollar is really looking like it's going to go lower. So I would say most likely we're probably going to see some maybe a retest of these kind of levels over here. But certainly I think the trade here is if we see it move up here and resist, check for resistance, and then start to move and take out these lows, that's kind of the trade where we're going to see the dollar rip to the downside there. But I think certainly we could see a little bit of a pushback up here. This goes in line with kind of what I was saying about the Aussie, what I was saying about potential for the metals as well, that this could sort of like be the time that we see, okay, a little bit of a rebalancing of this position. We see silver pull back to those entries. We see Aussie pull back to those entries. We see gold consolidate. And then maybe it sort of has a double rejection. Once the market goes, yep, okay, bang, we're out of here, and we see this kind of move down here, this may be your gold 5,000 move. It could be. Anyway, it's just sort of playing out the scenario. But I think certainly at the moment, short term, see what happens on Monday in that, but I wouldn't be surprised, even if you get, like these kind of things, you could get obviously a bit of a continuation of this move. But I think sort of once that's done, I think I wouldn't be surprised if Monday closes up around these levels over here, just to then sort of maybe see a bit of a turnaround Tuesday and then sort of keep continuing back down a little bit lower there. But I think certainly you got to say that the dollar's pretty much sort of cooked at the moment. So yeah, you can't say anything other than sort of take take note of just how badly that thing got slammed. I mean, have a look at this on a weekly. Like, this is the thing that we were sort of saying that sort of like, we could see the buyers moved up the bid, they moved up the bid, and then in 1 week, it's undone 1, 2, 3, well, kind of like 3, 4 weeks worth of movement into that direction. But we're coming back down into these levels over here. So if you look at this on a weekly, maybe we've got a little bit of a zone through here as to sort of why it kind of sort of held. This is the kind of area that you kind of want to sort of see, is this thing going to sort of move down here? So as I said, look, I think sort of, I wouldn't be surprised if we do see sort of some sort of effort up here. Obviously, this is pretty sort of strong wick area. Most likely, these things don't close like this, sort of punch through in first go. So even if it were to sort of see it move up here, you want to see it above this sort of 97.80 maybe, just to sort of get any sort of glimmer that this thing may recover. But certainly we're coming into a big sort of weekly rejection area. So it's going to be a big tell this week, because I think certainly if we see the push up early and then we take out the lows, well, we kind of know where it's heading. It's kind of like heading down this 96.60 kind of area, which is actually the 161 retracement of this recovery move up through here as well. So yeah, I think I'll sort of be watching Monday to sort of see how the flows sort of react with this. But certainly the triggers for this are going to be, if it does get that move up, if we see that rejection, then we take out the lows, that's okay, bang. Get short on the dollars, because we're going down to 96.60, and that's going to be major tests. All right, and finally, just finish off with the yen, because the yen, like there was a lot of talk of whether it was intervention or not. I think the general consensus at the end of it wasn't. It wasn't, because I covered this on the week, so throughout the week, but definitely on the Friday just prior to this happening, and I said, look, firstly, this red zone here, we've superseded the 2008 levels. 2007 maybe, was it just before 2007? Was it? Yeah, just before 2008, so 2007 levels. We came back to, actually we got above it, we went 109. So right back to May 1991. Only one time have we been higher than this, and that's when BOJ intervened. And I think this is why people are sort of saying, hey, look, it was an intervention, because this is what happens when they intervene. They come down 17% over a matter of 5 weeks. Though this is a very high resistance area. And as you can see, it had a very big slapback. You put it on a low time frame, you can see the reaction that it had, this little candle here. I mean, in the grand scheme of things, it doesn't look like much, but still, this was in a matter of seconds that it went from 109 down to 107.70 bounced and actually took out that low and closed down a little bit below it there. So very, apart from sort of like Aussie ripping to the top side there, I think that's worth taking note, at least in the short term, that where this thing bounced from. Actually, it turns out it bounced. Look at how perfect that is. It bounced on the top side of this channel. That was the level for it to hold. It didn't hold. I wouldn't be surprised if we see a bit of a continuation of this move here, because now you've got, I mean, this, yes, lower time frames, but you've got, there's a little thing going, you've got lower highs, and now you've got lower lows. So I would be, I mean, look, I wouldn't say long term you're looking to sort of necessarily short this thing too much because, the end's very weak. But, the fact that it had that strong reaction, very decent bounce, but then sort of like a second attempt at it and a push through, well, now you've got to accept that we're actually getting a little bit of a pullback down these ways here. And you can sort of think, okay, where could this be going to? Maybe it could be some horizontals. Let's put some put a 4 hour on this thing here. Oops, like that. This little zone through here could be an opportunity. Or basically, probably I would say more like even this seems a little bit close for me. I would say sort of like maybe if you can get a retest of this channel coming through here, this seems to have been fairly reliable. Should you get a move back down to say 106, 106 actually held a number of times in that, sort of like throughout the week, sort of chopping along through here. But I wouldn't be surprised if we see some short-term downside here and continuation of this stronger sort of yen move. Like we had the BOJ this week and they held as they always kind of do. But I think people are starting to get a little itchy fingers, and that's because we are up in that sort of big resistance zone. I mean, if we have a look at the one that the market always seems to sort of reference for this, I mean, which is with everything to go to, is UJ. And look at that. Like, you can't sort of say that, hold on, wait, something isn't happening here. Apart from the fact, okay, yes, this was US dollar was getting hammered, but, and obviously sort of like yen makes up a portion of it. But you got to say, like, the point of this is to try and pinpoint where the rotation is happening. And if market is still sort of looking for these kind of currencies, and then they're not picking the US dollar, well, bang, this thing got absolutely clobbered here. So maybe some flows are trying to find their way back into the yen. Let's have a look at the yen against something else. So this is the yen against the pound. Okay, if you take the US dollar, DXY, kind of out of the equation, you can see that even here, it wasn't impacted. It wasn't not impacted from that sharp little sell down. Like, that was across the board with the yen. It wasn't just like, against one currency or another. It was across the board. And this also took out its lows. This is probably a little bit closer to what we saw with the Aussie, though. So, with Aussie yen here, as you can see, like a little bit more sort of like Aussie yen probably actually a little bit lower there, but it was a bit higher. So I wouldn't be surprised if we potentially see a bit of a continuation of this move, particularly while US dollar is on the back foot. As I said, I wouldn't be surprised, a little bit of a sort of continuation to the downside with these ones over here. So what I'll kind of be looking is probably around maybe that sort of 106 area. If you get an opportunity and we see the buyers sort of come back in, down this level over here, continuation here, look, you might get some reaction, 106.70, but I would say probably better to go 106, this 106.70. But if you get if you get an opportunity around 106, and we see something to this sort of effect, and we can see sort of like, again, that sort of little structure of the two temps down, and we see it hold, and then take out the bounce high, that's probably the trade there, and I wouldn't be surprised if we get this to sort of carry back up over here like this. So I think this is more just sort of like, it was in a very high area, it got slapped by God knows who. However, I wouldn't be surprised if we see some sort of a further sort of continuation down to that 106 area, and then look for potentially another move up to these levels over here. But you just got to be cautious with this thing because it is in that high intervention kind of area. As I said, it's only one time it's been this high. in the last better part of 40 years. So yeah, sort of very sort of cautious around this area here. Let's just jump back on a lower time frame, and as you can say, yeah. So this is the kind of area that I'd be very interested in. We still have that sort of other sort of channel, or maybe resistance support sort of thing, but it's moved right away from that. So for the time being, it's certainly not sort of respecting that at all. Um, So I think this sort of early channel would be something to pay attention to. Should this little rising sort of support here fail, so say we get this little bounce here and then this comes down for a second effort, it gets down underneath here, I'd be cautious about sort of some of these levels here holding. I guess underneath here you could probably be looking for something down over here. That would probably give you a better kind of risk reward. But certainly through this little chop area, if we get a rally effort here and it takes out the low, I don't know if these little sort of choppy little areas may hold it, and I'd probably be looking back down and lower around that 104 area. Certainly something happened to cause that, and I think the market's on edge, so I think a short-term bias would probably be the safer bet than trying to buy this thing at near 40-year highs. All right, quick look at what we've got sort of data-wise coming up this week. We got a bit of US data on the Monday. Actually, sorry, on the Monday we got nothing. We got absolutely nothing. So through Asia or through Europe, I mean, nothing that affects us. We've got durable goods. One quick thing we did have actually, we had PMIs on Friday, and that sort of missed to the downside, which added to that sort of sell US kind of trade. So yeah, durable goods on Monday, looking to see a little bit of a tick up on the month-on-month there, and also the cores also looking to move up with these little stars. I'm assuming this is, yep, so it's also delayed, so you can't really even sort of put too much weight in this kind of stuff. Quiet. We've got Trump speaking and that. I mean, I don't know why you need to put this on here. This guy sort of, I don't even know when he sleeps, to be honest, because it just seems like he's just constantly sort of pumping out stuff. Anyway, sort of he's talking tentatively on Tuesday night. That's fine, great, whatever. CPI for Aussie. I think this is, we got US manufacturing, consumer confidence on the Wednesday there. Consumer confidence, slightly tick up. What's it normally around? Yeah, so it's still on the low end of stuff. It's the uncertainty. I think that's the big thing. It's another sort of driver for the metals of that sort of people just don't like this. What's the point of taking a gamble when Trump can just sort of tweet something and you get blown out of your positions? They like sort of something that's a bit more on a global stage. So gold, obviously, silver, these kind of things which can't really impact as much. Manufacturing looking to improve, but also still negative, so that's not looking sort of too rosy for the US dollar in those bits of data there. CPI will be the big one here. I'm sure we get the quarterly out of this, so I'll have to sort of do that, cover that a little bit closer. But this is going to be the big one for Aussie. If we see a high print, particularly on the quarterly, because that's what Bullock's been sort of touting about, then I think that's pretty much green light status for, if not a hike, then a very hawkishly worded hold, which can still obviously be very bullish for the Aussie dollar. And if the secret sauce I've always said to the Aussie dollar, look, this will sort of push Aussie anyway. We saw it this week have a very strong week. But if the US dollar is also being bought, Aussie will get sort of subdued with its move. But the secret sauce for Aussie going up is a hawkish setup, strong jobs, high inflation on the local front, with the US dollar being sold off. That's Aussie pumping. And that's what's going to get Aussie above 70 cents if this continues. Moving forward, that's kind of Wednesday daytime. Wednesday night, Thursday morning, we've got a bit of BOC stuff. They seem to be holding flat, not really too interested. We got press conference. We've got the FOMC happening here as well, so they're tipped for a hold here. So I think this is the big sort of question that's sort of about the Fed, because again, look, you're balancing the Fed holding on more on the sort of dovish cutting cycle potential. So they're looking between a cut and a hold, while Aussie RBA are looking between a hold and a hike. Hence, Aussie sort of appreciating a little bit against it. But look, it's quite interesting that they're actually sort of tipping a hold here. So I think that had been pretty much the consensus actually now. That it's not too much of a shocker. I think last I checked it was like a 95% chance of them holding. So let's pull this across here. It's a little Fed watch thing. 97% chance. I mean, look, it's come out with a prediction so we can see what that's looking for there as well. So, and then into March. still looking to hold. Small little creep in of a cut there. April. I mean, look at for people that sort of say that they're expecting all these sort of cuts. I mean, the market's certainly not pricing it, at least for the next couple of months. If we take it through to June, so yeah, you can see sort of probably by June you're probably looking at least one cut. Sort of coming in there, but certainly a hold seems to be the more sort of likelihood, at least through till mid-June. Of course, these things can change, on a dime kind of thing, but it's just another thing to look at. It's not the gospel. So that'll be a big one on Thursday morning there. Unemployment claims, these are still very low, but seemed to not really sort of help. I think it's almost like jobs has kind of really just disappeared from the radar of the talk about what's sort of guiding the Fed's movements, because these are very strong. It's actually been on a very much down. Like if you have a look on the graph, you can see, look at this drop off here. Bam, we have one little flare up month, but generally you can see this is just dropping, 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 dropping coming through. And this flare up month here was obviously sort of off the back of a super low number as well. So it kind of balances the average probably around that sort of 212 kind of thing. So who knows what happened with the numbers there? But you can certainly see that the trend is moving down here at the moment, but doesn't seem to be sort of helping the dollar at all. So anyway, again, it's just part of it all. CPI over in Japan looks to be cooling a little bit, moving through end of the week, and then we got PPI to finish the week off again. These little stars are delayed kind of thing, so who knows when that's going to be finished. There was talk a couple of weeks ago about sort of potentially another government shutdown at the end of the month, but that seems to sort of dropped off at the moment, so we'll have to sort of wait and see, but yeah, that's it for me for now.